Today, I want to talk about 6 of the most common things talked about in Vietnam. How cheap is it to live in Vietnam? Is dating actually as easy as it seems in Vietnam? Is the food really that good? And finally, is it safe to live in Vietnam? So let's get straight into the very first one. Can you live like a king in Vietnam? Now, when a lot of people first move out to Vietnam, they're typically in tourist areas and they're coming from the West. Everything is ridiculously cheap. So in essence, the answer is kind of a yes, right? Right when you get here. Now, the question is, when you start living here, things change. Your income no longer becomes American income or Western income. It becomes Vietnamese income, meaning you got to be a teacher or you do some other type of job out here. That's when things start getting more expensive. You're most likely going to be a native or non-native English speaker, and you'll be able to offset that quite well because the minimum salary out here is like between $15 to $20 an hour. And you working for a week is like the salary of most Vietnamese in a month. So you can live quite well out here. Now, when it comes to bigger cities like Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, there are spots you'd probably want to avoid if you're trying to live more lavish with less money. And if you're in Saigon, District 2, District 7 are typically where you want to avoid. District 1 isn't as bad as people say, because I'm assuming you're not going to be living on Bui Vien or right near there. You probably shouldn't, because you're right next to Bui Vien is actually District 4, which is like the Chicago of Saigon, and you're right next to Chinatown, so you don't want to be living near Bui Vien. You're probably going to be in the business area, and that kind of brings to the key point, it's a business area. So most people don't live out there. If you are going to be living in Vietnam, like in Saigon, I strongly suggest like Go Vop is a good spot. That's where I used to live most of the time. Bien Thanh is another spot. And if you're working as a teacher, District 3 is a good spot because you're kind of in the middle of everything. Now, the last one, are all Vietnamese people scammers? And the answer is yes. Now, do only Western people deal with this? The answer is no. Scamming is something Vietnamese do to each other. Scamming is something Vietnamese do to Western people. The degree of scamming is typically much higher for non-Vietnamese people. When it comes to other Vietnamese, it's a constant battle. Like taking a vacation to a like Phan Thiet or something, going through a travel agency, Vietnamese are constantly dealing with scams. We all deal with it. The best way to avoid scams though is just to know what things cost ahead of time so you know when you should just walk away. It's perfectly fine to walk away if you're being charged too much. You will deal with scams, just know where to be. My advice, stay out of tourist areas. Number 2, is dating easy in Vietnam? This has been a very hard thing to deal with for a lot of Western people. Well, when you come out here, you typically see a lot of older men, white, black, whatever the case is, dating Vietnamese girls because they're more feminine, right? Like you hear about the passport bros and all that stuff. And that is a thing to do out here, man. I mean, you come out here, you meet a young or just a middle-aged Vietnamese woman that's more feminine, more suitable for your desire, and you marry. Life is good, right? But is it possible these days, especially 2024 moving forward, I mean, Tinder, Bumble, these types of apps are just full of like girls selling a service. When you do meet a girl, sometimes you don't even know if she used to be in that game of like employment. The main question I always ask is like, do I find a girl in the city or do I find them in the country? And I'm gonna be honest, it doesn't matter. When I see girls in the countryside, a lot of them are just like TikTok brain. You know what I mean? Like they don't really know too much. Like they just like, they're TikTok brain. They're obsessed with TikTok. So you end up meeting like a boring wife, which is probably suitable for a lot of people. You know, you just want a feminine wife that stays home, takes care of stuff, right? That could be something you could deal with. When it comes to the city life, you might get more of a westernized girl. I've seen a lot of like, I don't need no man girls in Saigon or Hanoi lately. So is there a better one? If I had to pick one, I would say the countryside would be better, but still go with precaution. Now, the next question I kind of merged in here as well, and a lot of Western people get concerned about this. Am I just marrying a girl that just wants a green card? Does she just want to go back to America? And I'm going to give you this simple rule on this. If she's from the age of 18 to 24, most likely not. Like, it's very rare to find a girl in that age bracket that wants to go back to America or Canada with you. She doesn't need a green card. She's been living the last 18 years being babied by her parents. Why is she just going to disappear? The rarity, though, it does happen. You're probably going to be having the family asking how are they going to go there too. So that's something to be aware of. But if you are dealing with like 18 to 24-year-old girls, typically they don't want to leave Vietnam. Now, if you're meeting girls that are like the age of 28 to like 35, they have older kids that are already grown up, or they don't have kids at all. Like places like Vung Tau, Central Vietnam, this is common. These girls, you have a higher chance that they want to leave Vietnam and go because they're not attached to their families like the younger girls are. They don't have commitments here. A lot of women at that age are considered throwaway girls. It sounds like a horrible term, but it's an actual Vietnamese term used out here in the culture, which means that they're too old and nobody wants to marry them. Again, this is just how the culture is in Vietnam. A lot of Western people hear this and they freak out like, that's so horrible. Like, it's what it is. So if you are meeting somebody 28 years or older, you can expect this to happen sometimes, but not always. But it could be something that comes up. But between either age group you get, if this does come up, it usually comes up pretty soon, like right away. And if this does come up for you where they're like, I want to go to America, or can I get a citizenship if we get married? Be aware of the family's thoughts on this, because this is where you could get glued into where if you go back to California or Quebec or something like that, that the mother-in-law wants to move in with you. And I'm telling you, if you move the entire family to America or Quebec or like Perth, Australia, and then you and the wife don't work out, you're not getting rid of that family, bro. They are now officially Australian. They're officially American or Canadian now. Like, you are stuck with them for life. So make that decision wisely. Number 3, is the food good in Vietnam? The food in Vietnam, I think, is some of the best in the world. It's so good. It has such good taste. It's got such a diversity of taste. Even though Vietnamese food in general is boring, it's just rice noodles and some kind of meat and vegetables. That's really all Vietnam food is. There's nothing too extravagant about it, you know? They know how to mix it, the spices, the means of cooking, like how things are marinated, how the broth itself is marinated. Stuff like that makes it so good. And I really do think Vietnamese food is some of the best in all of Asia. And when you go anywhere in Asia, like you go to Singapore, Japan, I've been out to Taiwan a couple times, you go to the Philippines, you will find designated Vietnamese restaurants everywhere. You won't find a Thai place, you won't find a Lao restaurant, you won't find a Chinese restaurant all the time, but you always find a Vietnamese one because the food is that good. Now, let's flip that coin over a little bit. In regards to, is the food healthy? It's absolutely not. Unfortunately, Vietnam food is some of the most unhealthy food you'll ever encounter. It's the healthiest on paper. It's just vegetables, it's just rice, it's just noodles, basic meats, right? So it's good. But the problem with this is how it's managed, how it's held, how the food's stored. If you've ever been to a market in Vietnam, you see the pork and the beef and all that stuff just like on the road or on the ground, or it's on a table in the sun. People are around grabbing it, touching it, then they're playing with the vegetables. There's just so much cross-contamination going on with the food. You generally do have to be careful of that. Now, I know a lot of people have said this in regards to like, what if you go to a more expensive restaurant? Hey, David, you're just being a brokey. Go somewhere that isn't on the side of the road. And I agree with you. I always thought that too. But all these restaurants, 5-star. We were actually in we were at 2 5-star hotels in Phu Quoc Island years ago. And they all get their food from the same street vendors, from the same street markets. It all comes from the same spot. The only difference is how it's stored once they obtain the food. So everything from the beginning of killing it or harvesting it to the point where they're like transporting it, cleaning it, all that stuff, it's all the same as at a street market food. It's all the same. It's just those final moments before they actually prep and give it to you. And typically, even 5-star restaurants aren't doing a lot. They're just kind of spraying the food down and then they cook it, they fry it, whatever it is. It's not much different than the street food. But the street food, I would say like a lot of the vendors will take water out of a water fountain or out of the lake and start like cooking it with you. Like I saw at Hotel when we were in Hanoi, there's the Hotel lake and there's a park there, and the street vendors were going to the lake, pulling water out of it, boiling it and cooking noodles and like frying food and shit in it. It was just like, and you just look across the lake and people are peeing in it. You'd see dead fish floating every day at like 10 a.m. Like, it's disgusting, but they use it. And again, that's what makes such great food so unhealthy for you. So keep that in mind. Vietnamese food is definitely worth trying, but it's definitely unhealthy. I think the best Vietnamese food I've ever had that was healthy as well, I think it was in Cambodia. And the very last one, number 4, is Vietnam safe? Now, this is typically asked about women, and the answer is yes for men and women. Vietnam is one of the safer countries you could go around in. And honestly, at the same time, I think it's safe to say that Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia are on the same page. They're all relatively safe. I mean, for every time you tell me something bad happened to some girl in Cambodia or Laos, I can tell you a time it's happened in Vietnam. It's always the same. The crime in Asia in general is pretty much petty theft and like snatching purses and stuff like that. Like, most guys leave all their stuff in their front pockets. They don't use their back pockets. And there's a hack for you if you didn't know that. Women typically get their purse snatched, and The girls that I know out here, they typically have the strap, their purse, but they have like an extra strap that goes from the strap and it'll clip to their belt or their shirt or something like that. So if somebody does cut the strap of their purse, it's still connected to them. You see what I mean? So there are ways to prevent stuff like that, but you can walk down the street at night. You're not gonna get jumped like you were in Chicago. You're not gonna get mugged walking down Saigon. You're not going to get robbed. You're not going to go to a store and there's like a shoot up going on. You're not going to go to a bank and there's a bank robbery. Stuff like that doesn't really happen in Vietnam because it's a communist country. Like if you did those things in Vietnam, got caught, it's over. Like your life is done. And this could include your family's life too, depending on how bad your crime was. So Vietnam is definitely safe for men or women, daytime, nighttime. It's all about the same. So hopefully that answers some of those questions. This was the 6 most misunderstood things about Vietnam. I just condensed it down to 4 for you guys to make it a little quicker. And if you do want to support the channel, definitely check out the member spot. Members have already seen this video probably like 3 or 4 or 5 days ago before you guys got to see it. And you'll always get ahead of the jump starts on videos and you'll get extra content that I only serve to the members only. So check that out in the join button below. So I'm going to get out of here. So till then guys, I will see you again.